Are you terrified to imagine a world where the darkest corners of the human mind are brought to life through unimaginable torture methods? A world where your screams are not cries for help, but notes in a macabre symphony, orchestrated for an unseen audience. Picture a place where pain transcends mere punishment, becoming a grotesque performance, a chilling spectacle designed to linger in the mind long after the flesh has healed, or failed to. This isn't the realm of nightmares, but a forgotten corner of our collective past, where human ingenuity was twisted towards an unspeakable craft. For centuries, across continents and cultures, empires rose and fell, leaving behind more than just ruins and relics. They bequeathed to us a legacy of carefully crafted tools, instruments born not from a desire to swiftly end a life, but to meticulously, systematically, break the human soul. These were not weapons of war, but implements of control, designed to unravel the very fabric of a person's being, to make an example, to instill a fear so profound it echoed through generations. The architects of such devices understood a terrible truth about power. What you are about to witness, what we will explore together in the dim corridors of history, is not fiction. These are not tales spun to frighten children around a campfire. They are the stark, documented realities of methods conceived and employed by human hands upon human bodies. The chill you might feel is not just the story, but the unsettling recognition of what humanity is capable of. Prepare yourselves, for we are about to unearth history's darkest secrets. We begin in the hushed darkness of a chamber, where silence itself becomes an instrument of torment. Here stands the Judas cradle, or its design is deceptively simple, almost minimalist. A sturdy frame, often wooden, supporting a single, upward-pointing pyramid. Its apex sharpened to a cruel, unforgiving point. There are no complex mechanisms, no whirring gears, just a stark, brutal efficiency that speaks volumes about its purpose. The victim, stripped bare, vulnerable, would be hoisted above this unholy seat. Ropes, coarse and unyielding, would bind their wrists, their ankles, pulling them taut, suspending them in the stale air. Imagine the cold dread, the dawning realization of what is to come, as they are positioned directly over that sharpened peak. The anticipation, the sheer psychological weight of knowing the inevitable, was a torture in itself. Then, slowly, with agonizing precision, they would be lowered, inch by excruciating inch. The descent was often controlled by a torturer who could pause, prolong, and intensify the experience at will. The sharpened point of the pyramid was designed to meet the most sensitive areas of the human body. The initial contact, a piercing shock, would only be the beginning of a protracted ordeal. The true horror of the Judas cradle lay in its gradual, unyielding pressure. As the victim's own body weight bore down, the pyramid would begin its gruesome work, not with a quick, merciful incision, but with a slow, tearing invasion. Tissues would stretch, then rip. Muscles would be forced apart. The body, designed to protect its core, would be breached from within, in the most degrading and agonizing manner imaginable. The pain would be a constant, escalating wave, a fire consuming them from the inside out. Consider now a method that combines the primal with the psychological, a form of torment that taps into our deepest, most instinctual fears. Rat torture, in its various horrifying iterations, is a stark example of how simple elements, a common rodent, a basic enclosure, and a source of heat, can be weaponized to inflict unimaginable suffering. Its genius, if one can use such a term for something so vile, lies in its simplicity and its direct assault on the victim's sanity as much as their flesh. The most infamous version involves the victim being restrained, often tied down securely, unable to move or defend themselves. A cage, typically made of metal, open on one side, would then be placed upon their bare abdomen or chest. Inside this cage, a rat, or sometimes multiple rats, would be introduced. The creatures themselves, initially, might be as confused and frightened as the human captive, trapped in this sudden, confined space against a warm, living surface. The true horror begins when heat is applied to the surface of the metal cage. A flame, hot coals, or some other heating element would gradually, inexorably, raise the temperature of the enclosure. The metal would grow hotter and hotter, making the interior unbearable for the trapped rodent. Panic would set in. The rat, driven by its powerful survival instinct, would desperately seek an escape from the searing heat and the confines of its prison. With no other way out, the terrified animal would turn towards the only perceived avenue of escape, the victim's body. It would begin to claw, to bite, to burrow into the soft flesh beneath it, seeking refuge from the encroaching heat. The victim, fully conscious, would be forced to endure the sensation of the desperate creature tearing its way into their abdomen, a living instrument of torture, driven mad by its own agony. The pain would be immense, a visceral, gnawing horror. This method was not merely about physical pain, though that was undeniably extreme. It was a profound psychological assault. We travel now to ancient Greece, a cradle of philosophy, democracy, and art, yet also the birthplace of one of history's most theatrical and horrifying instruments of execution, the brazen bull. Conceived by Perilaus of Athens for Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas, Sicily, this device was designed not just to kill, but to transform death into a grotesque public spectacle, a terrifying performance art. Its very form, a life-sized bull cast entirely in bronze, was a monument to cruel ingenuity. The bull was hollow, with a door cunningly concealed on its side or back. The condemned individual would be forced inside this metallic beast, the heavy bronze door latched shut, sealing them within a dark, cramped, and airless prison. They were alone, entombed within the belly of this unyielding effigy, aware of the fate that awaited them. A fate designed for maximum auditory and visual impact on those gathered outside to witness the grim proceedings. Once the victim was secured inside, a fire would be kindled beneath the bronze bull. As the flames grew, the metal would begin to heat, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. The interior of the bull would transform into an oven, the air becoming scorching, the metal walls radiating an unbearable heat. The victim, trapped within, would begin to roast alive, their body subjected to an agonizing, slow burn. But the true diabolical genius of the brazen bull lay in its acoustic design. Perilaus, its creator, had engineered a complex system of tubes and pipes running from the bull's interior to its nostrils and mouth. These were meticulously crafted to modulate the victim's screams of agony. As they cried out in unbearable pain, their desperate sounds would be twisted and amplified, emerging from the bull's mouth not as human cries, but as the bellowing roar of an enraged beast. Imagine the scene. A crowd, gathered, perhaps in a public square or arena. The great bronze bull, smoke possibly issuing from its nostrils, roaring with a sound that was both terrifying and, to some, perhaps, perversely, entertaining. They were witnessing a state-sanctioned execution, yet it was cloaked in the guise of a monstrous spectacle. The humanity of the victim was erased, replaced by the sound of a mythical beast in its death throes. The brazen bull stands as a chilling reminder of how cruelty can be intertwined with spectacle, how pain can be commodified as entertainment. Chapter 4. The Pair of Anguish. Unspeakable Expansion. We now encounter a device whose name, the Pair of Anguish, belies its truly horrific function. Deceptively small, often intricately crafted, it resembled a metallic pair, segmented into several spoon-like petals. At its top, a screw or key mechanism hinted at its sinister purpose. This was not an instrument designed for a swift end, but for inflicting excruciating, internal pain and humiliation. A tool of punishment rather than immediate execution. The Pair of Anguish was designed to be inserted into one of the body's orifices, the mouth, the rectum, or the vagina. Its use was often targeted, intended to punish specific perceived transgressions. For instance, it might be used in the mouth of those accused of heresy, blasphemy, or spreading dissent, in the vagina of women accused of witchcraft or adultery, or in the rectum of individuals accused of homosexuality. The very act of insertion was a violation, a prelude to a deeper, more invasive torment. Once the closed pair was positioned inside the chosen orifice, the torturer would begin to turn the screw mechanism at its top. Slowly, relentlessly, the metal segments of the pair would begin to separate, to expand outwards. Like a grotesque flower blooming in reverse, it would stretch the surrounding tissues from within, exerting immense, unbearable pressure. The victim would be entirely at the mercy of the operator, who could control the speed and degree of expansion. The pain inflicted by the Pair of Anguish is difficult to comprehend. Chapter 5. Scaphism. Devoured by nature. From the ancient Persian Empire comes a method of execution so grotesque, so drawn out, that it seems almost a product of nightmare rather than historical record. Scaphism, also known colloquially as the boats, This was not a quick death, nor one delivered by human hands directly, but rather a slow, agonizing surrender to the relentless forces of nature, orchestrated with a chilling, methodical cruelty. It was a punishment designed to make the victim a living feast. The condemned individual would be taken to a stagnant body of water, a swamp, or a marsh. There, they would be placed inside a narrow boat, or sometimes, more horrifyingly, fastened securely between two identical boats, one placed over the other, forming a sort of coffin that encased their body but left their head, hands, and feet protruding. They were trapped, exposed, and utterly helpless, a prisoner of wood and water. The next stage of this horrifying ritual involved force feeding. The victim would be compelled to ingest vast quantities of milk and honey. If they refused, sharp implements might be used to prick their eyes or otherwise coerce them. This rich, sweet mixture was intended to induce severe diarrhea, filling the boat coffin with excrement. Furthermore, more honey would be lavishly smeared over their exposed face, hands, and feet, attracting insects. And then, they would be set adrift on the stagnant water, or simply left moored near the bank, under the sweltering sun. The combination of human waste and the sweet scent of honey would prove an irresistible lure to every manner of insect and vermin that inhabited such places. Flies, wasps, beetles, and countless other creatures would descend upon the helpless victim, drawn to the feast that had been prepared for them. The true horror of scaphism was its protracted nature. The insects would begin to bite and sting, laying eggs in the victim's flesh. Chapter 6. The breaking wheel. A public fracture. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, stands as one of history's most brutal and public forms of capital punishment, particularly prevalent in Europe from the Middle Ages well into the early modern period. This was not merely a tool for execution, it was a stage for a gruesome spectacle, designed to inflict maximum pain and serve as a terrifying deterrent to onlookers. Its very presence in a town square signaled a grim day of reckoning. The condemned, often after a procession through the streets, would be taken to the wheel, a large, heavy-spoked wooden wheel, similar to those used on carts or carriages. They would be laid upon it, or sometimes upon a cross-shaped scaffold, with their limbs stretched out and tied to the spokes or the frame. Their arms and legs would be positioned over the gaps between the spokes, or deliberately arranged so that the impending blows would strike with devastating effect. The executioner, wielding a heavy iron bar, or sometimes the wheel itself, would then proceed to systematically break the victim's bones. Each strike was often carefully aimed, intended to shatter the major bones of the limbs, the shins, femurs, forearms, and upper arms. The sound of splintering bone, the screams of the victim, would echo through the assembled crowd. This was a slow, methodical destruction of the human frame, piece by piece. The number of blows and the specific bones targeted could vary according to the sentence or local custom. Sometimes, a merciful blow, the coup de grace, would be delivered to the chest or neck to end the victim's life after their limbs were shattered. However, in many cases, the intent was to prolong the suffering. The victim, with multiple broken limbs, would be left alive, their mangled body then woven through the spokes of the wheel. Once the initial breaking was complete, the wheel, now bearing its gruesome burden, would be hoisted onto a tall pole or mast. The victim, still alive, though horrifically injured and in unimaginable pain, would be left exposed to the elements, to the gaze of the public, and to the attention of carrion birds. Chapter 7. The Waiting Game. Shattering the mind. Not all torture leaves visible scars upon the flesh. Some of the most insidious methods aim to unravel the mind, to erode the very essence of self, without necessarily spilling a drop of blood. Psychological torture, the waiting game in its many forms, is a chilling testament to the understanding that the human psyche can be as vulnerable, if not more so, than the physical body. It is a slow, creeping horror, an invisible assault that can leave its victims irrevocably broken. Consider the deliberate use of sensory deprivation. The white room, a space devoid of color, texture, or any discernible feature. The victim is left in complete isolation, often with constant, unvarying light, or conversely, in perpetual darkness. There are no sounds, or perhaps only a persistent, maddening white noise. Days blur into nights, time loses all meaning. The mind, starved of stimulus, begins to turn inward, to feed upon itself, leading to hallucinations, paranoia, and a complete detachment from reality. Conversely, sensory overload can be equally devastating. Imagine being subjected to continuous blaring noise, music, screams, or discordant sounds at extreme volumes for hours or days on end. Or being exposed to strobe lights or extreme temperatures, never allowed a moment of peace or rest. Sleep deprivation is a cornerstone of this approach, systematically denying the mind its crucial period of recuperation, leading to cognitive breakdown, emotional instability, and an inability to distinguish truth from illusion. The waiting game itself can be a potent tool. The constant threat of physical harm, never knowing when or if it will come, can be more damaging than the harm itself. Mock executions, the sounds of other prisoners being tortured, the unpredictable behavior of captors, these all contribute to a state of chronic fear and anxiety. So why? Why did civilizations, often at the peak of their supposed enlightenment, resort to such elaborate, such horrifying depths of cruelty? The answers are as dark and complex as the methods themselves: power, fear, control. These meticulously designed torments were rarely just about punishing an individual for a crime committed. They were potent, visceral warnings, broadcast to entire populations. A single, publicly tortured body could communicate the state's authority and its ruthlessness far more effectively than any written decree or spoken law ever could. It was a language of pain, universally understood. We look back now, from what we hope is a more enlightened vantage point, and recoil in horror at these barbaric practices. Yet, it is a chilling thought that some of these methods, these philosophies of control and coercion, never truly disappeared from the world. They evolved, adapted, changed their shape to fit new contexts, new sensibilities. And today, some of the most effective forms of control, of breaking the human will, happen in silence, behind closed doors, or even through invisible digital means, leaving scars that no eye can see. The darkest part of history, the part that settles like a cold dread in the soul, is not just what happened then, but how much of its shadow still echoes in the present. The human capacity for cruelty, once unleashed, is a difficult specter to lay to rest. If you wish to delve deeper into these shadowed corners, if you feel there are more secrets to unearth, let your voice be heard. Comment part 2 below if you want more of this hidden history. And please, subscribe for more explorations into the veiled narratives of our past.